So how lucky am I to have the opportunity to interview and to spend at least an hour with the great, the one and only Ben Stiller. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good, Michael. It's good to talk to you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It has certainly been a long time. You know, so Ben, I don't want to waste any time here because the listeners are obviously hot and excited in order to hear this conversation. So let's jump straight into this thing. As someone with a massive public platform, because I understand yours is about 5.7 million followers just on Twitter alone, the ability to amplify certain voices, news, and opinion, I'm sure you feel a sense of responsibility to get it right. How do you feel when you see others on, say, like the right, abusing these platforms and pushing out all of these conspiracy theories? Because some 70% of Republicans polled actually believe that the election was rigged. Now, misinformation is everywhere, and an entire right-wing ecosystem exists to amplify those lies. How do you think we begin to put the genie back in the so-called bottle when it comes to fake news? Because is it regulation of the platforms themselves, or does the left need as aggressive a media ecosystem as exists on the right? What's your thoughts?
Oh, gosh, that's a heavy question, Michael. I mean, first of all, I'm awful at Twitter. I am just bad at it. I engage sometimes when I get emotionally pulled in, sometimes I'll want to respond to something. And then I find if I wait like 10 seconds or a minute, sometimes the urge will go away, but that natural sort of response when you see somebody writing something that is false or something that you think is inflammatory. I mean, I think it's that human reaction. So I'm just really bad at it. I think my own sort of like just view from as a person who's on it, I don't know why I have 5.7 million people. I don't believe that, actually. I don't know where they are or who they are. Somehow, there's people, I never get into like the real demographics of Twitter. I don't know, have you gotten like deep into the demographics of like where the actual followers are for you and all that?
No, I'm actually as bad at it as you are, but I don't have 5.7 million followers.
Right, but also you're a person who has something very specific that you're talking about because of what you've been through and what you've done and what you want to say. And for me, I'm kind of just like there, sort of like a lot of times I'm just like scrolling through to like kill time, and I think it's like really Twitter has become that thing that we go to when we want to procrastinate or just in our day. So sometimes it's entertainment. I'll look at it for news or whatever, but we're all in our own echo chamber with Twitter, right? You only follow really the people that you're interested in following. So I think it's a very distorted view that you're getting, either on the right or the left. I think when I start to dip into Twitter on the right, it gets me so really like upset sometimes when I see what people are writing, that it takes me to a place where then I want to like write something that's angry and responsive to that. And I don't think that's really helping anybody. So that's what I try to like take 30 seconds or a minute and really think about it. But I think everybody has ended up in their own echo chamber. And I think the left, maybe it's not as, I don't know, the reality of it, but I know that people are speaking a lot of the time to themselves. And when they cross over and you start to get into conversations sometimes with people, every once in a while, I will get into a conversation with somebody from the right. I usually try to end it in a way that's human or like try to feel like it's like it becomes about connection and like people going, hey, I can appreciate that you have your point of view and I have my point of view.
Right, but remember that many of the times that you start engaging in conversation, that's where the bots and the trolls are really located. What they do is they say something which is inflammatory, that they know will certainly bother a certain group of individuals, and they hope that people, especially somebody like yourself who has the check mark next to his Twitter handle with 5.7 million followers, that you start to engage, because that's their whole goal, is to upset the ecosystem, to create a conversation where no conversation really existed.
Yeah, and I think that, honestly, this reminds me, I'm a big Star Trek fan.
Me too.
There's a Star Trek episode where the Klingons and the crew at the Enterprise are fighting each other constantly, and they're feeding this alien entity that just like is this like energy source that's hovering, like this like kind of light source that's in the corner of the room, and it gets brighter and brighter every time that they fight with each other. And I really feel like that's what's going on, like those bots and trolls. It's being fed, the antipathy and the divisiveness, and it's being fed, and it's feeding this sort of like this greater, I guess, I don't like what is benefiting, is the social media platforms, I guess, are benefiting, and then the people who want to spread the disinformation are benefiting.
Yeah, that they do. And who's perfect for it? But our orange-crusted clown, right? Our idiot in chief with 100 million followers. The president has just about 100 million followers. But his big mistake, and many people's mistake, is just because you have a follower doesn't mean you have a supporter. I mean, there are people that go on Twitter because they don't like Ben Stiller. Right?
Yes.
That anytime that you say something, they want to say something nasty to you because that makes them feel good about themselves, assuming that they're even real, because these bot farms are out of control right now. I mean, you could buy, as most of these celebrities will sometimes do, they will buy 1 million, 2 million followers just to get the information out there so that they get the check, and that it's really more about their ego than anything. And they're just not real. And then you have companies that control hundreds of thousands of bots. And next thing you know, especially like what happened with me when I was under attack, all of a sudden you start getting all of these Twitter followers attacking you one after the other. And they all say virtually the same thing. And of course, none of them have real pictures of their faces on it. It's always a cartoon, or it's a cat or a dog or a banana. Something stupid like that.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, in terms of just our everyday lives, how much this is really changing our actual lives. And I think the people who have the ability to actually change our real life experience with Twitter are people like Trump, who can say something and then that will motivate people to do things. And that to me is the scary thing. I think
he knows, and he knows that he can do it.
Yeah. And I think, what some sort, celebrity might say about, another movie, or even what I might say about Trump, whatever, really doesn't really matter that much. But when there's somebody who's in a leadership position and who's spouting this divisive rhetoric, I mean, we're seeing the real life consequences of it. And that's what's upsetting to me.
Yeah. And it just adds to the divisiveness that he causes each and every time that he opens up his mouth. I mean, I just say he is legitimately one of the most ignorant and arrogant people that you can have. And to have him as a president when you're spewing these racist, these sexist, misogynistic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, homophobic, anti-Semitic rhetorics, right? There's a group that agrees with each and every one of those hateful points. And it doesn't matter to him. And he kind of enjoys the chaos, which is, of course, why I hashtag him Captain Chaos.
Yeah, I really wonder what that is in reality with him, like how much he actually enjoys that, and like why he's doing it. I mean, I don't know if he's doing it just to sort of in the moment to sort of, do something, or if he actually has a plan with it. That's what I really wonder about, because it seems like he's taken it to such a level that at this point it's, it's literally like it's changed the experience of our lives right now.
Yeah, Trump Derangement Syndrome.
And I think yeah.
What were you saying?
No, I'm saying I think, that's probably the point for him, it seems to me, is to have that, to be relevant, to have that effect on people, so people are talking about him or thinking about him.
Yeah, if they're not, he's unhappy. I mean, sometimes the way that you knew whether to go into his office about whether it was a bill that needed to be paid or a project that you wanted to get approved, the way that you knew was that you looked in the newspaper, and if he was on the front page of the paper, you knew it was going to be a good day. If he wasn't, you may want to reconsider, wait until the following day, till he said something that was, let's just say, news or lack of newsworthy that they decide to put on the front page of the paper. Then you knew that he was going to be in a good mood and it was a good time to go.
Yeah, that's great. What a great way to live.
It's a hell of a decade to spend. So Ben, let's now talk about you playing Michael Cohen, because you played me on Saturday Night Live. Now, what aspect of my personality or my physicality was key for you in nailing what I have to acknowledge was a pretty accurate portrayal? Did you study tapes of me on my television appearances? Tell the audience how the great Ben Stiller became Michael Cohen.
Well, first of all, the fact that you give it your stamp of approval, that makes me feel good.
Well, I do.
Because honestly, I don't know, first thing I thought was I have such a thin skin that, I always think, oh God, if there's somebody getting on Saturday Night Live and doing me, how would I deal with that? And not very well. But in the moment when I got the call, and it was so much in the news at the time, you were so much in the news at the time, for me, the first thing I thought was like, well, the guy is like, he's in New York. I saw this sort of interesting sort of dichotomy of fear and also like a killer too. So there was sort of like this combination, right? Where there was like a sensitivity in there of a human being who's like a deer in the headlights. That's what I felt like, deer in the headlights when you were like being brought in front of, having to go and testify, right? That incredible, just like the spotlight on you. But then I saw inside this guy who's sort of basically I'm like a guy who's just like trying to, kind of stand up for who I am. And so I felt like there was like a humanity in there that I was trying to connect with. That was like, I related to my own fear of going on Saturday Night Live to play you. I tried to take and use as if what you were going through, having to go and like testify in front of Congress.
Because you sort of got a lot of my physicalities, you got my motions down. When they started the episode, and all of a sudden you're speaking to Trump on the phone about Stormy Daniels. I mean, honestly, I have to tell you, my own mother and father called me and said, "Did you know that Ben was doing this?" I said, "No, why?" They said, "Because he really got you down packed. I thought maybe like you had worked with him, on making sure that it was right." And I said, "No, Ma, the guy's an actor," right?
I mean, I felt like, there's a humanity there. And like, I just was thinking like of, the situation that you were in was like this crazy situation. And then actually we were doing it. Stormy Daniels also was there too. So there was like this weird sort of meta reality because she was like in one of the sketches too. But the original idea was an idea that the writers had in SNL that it was, this Meet the Parents sort of parallel that Mueller, De Niro was Mueller and I was you. And I thought that was like a really funny idea. So it was really just sort of playing into that idea and then putting him on the lie detector, seemed like it really fit.
What's funny though, Ben, is that I would have expected that you remembered that we had met on several occasions, right? Especially the last time, I think we were at an art exhibit for, maybe it was Peter Tooney, and you were with your wife, I was with my wife, and we were talking because I had met your wife many times in the past. She's best friends with one of my college roommate, Greg's wife's, Jennifer. And right. We started talking about the children, and we were talking about the various schools where my children were at and where your children were at. So I thought that maybe somewhere in there that you had remembered the meeting, or that's how you sort of got the mannerisms down. I don't know, but I can only tell you did a great job. Well,
thank you, Mike. I blocked that out. Because I think going to do it, I was probably like, I think I really did not connect it because I think I saw you just as this person in the news, who, it was like it's also the thing of like, what I thought about after when I was doing is like, this is a human being. This is a person. He's got kids. I want to try to like do this in a way, like, I don't want it to be like this scathing, mean thing. But it's also satire, you know what I mean? It's parody. It's also like the world that also I can't imagine the world that you actually were in at that time, or the world with Trump and how that, how that went down on a daily basis. So like, I figured this is just part of the whole experience that you're having, is you can say, oh yeah, and Ben Stiller is doing me on Saturday Night Live, and just kind of like take it in stride.
Yeah, but I'm shocked that I heard you say that you're thin-skinned. I wouldn't think you to be thin-skinned.
I am. I'm a sensitive actor type. And, I think the guy from the Big Bang Theory, one of the guys from the Big Bang Theory did an impression of me once. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But I'm not great at it. But I also feel like, that's kind of, I mean, look, when you do movies or act, you do it, you put it out there, and then you have to figure out a way to kind of go forward and not kind of, some people are great at criticism or, reading reviews. And I did that for a while. And then I decided to stop reading reviews because I figured it just didn't help my process at all. But you kind of like, have to do your thing and figure out your way forward.
Yeah. So I guess the line from Dodgeball, "Nobody makes me drink my own blood," right, would probably sum it up pretty damn good.
I think, nobody makes me bleed my own blood. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, right. The other thing that was going on was I was thinking about you having to go to prison too, and I felt bad because I was also directing a limited series about a prison escape at the time at Clinton Correctional in upstate New York. So I was thinking, I was spending time around prisons, and I was also thinking at the time, like, oh, this is like what this guy is going to. And my worst fear in life is going to prison. That's like, I literally have nightmares about it. Just in life. So
then my recommendation is don't go. I actually never thought in my wildest imagination that I would ever be a felon, that I would ever go to prison. And I have to be honest with you, the drive up when I was self-surrendering to Otisville was one of the most surreal moments that you could ever possibly imagine. You get there, you sign in, they take you, they strip you out, they give you basically one pair of the worst underwear you're ever going to wear. They always give you either a pair of pants that are 2 sizes too small or 5 sizes too big. That's just part of the hazing process. The shirt, the t-shirts are all torn, and they're just gross. The socks have holes in them. I mean, it's really...
Yeah, the too small pants would probably be the worst, right? That's what really makes you feel bad. The 2 sizes.
Everything makes you feel bad. And, they give you a little roll, and then you have nothing. In your life, no matter what station of economics that you exist in, you have something. You have a car, you have a bed, you have a couch, right? You have a refrigerator, you have a pair of shoes. You have nothing. You have nothing. I mean, it is the most humbling experience. And you're staring, for the most part, at a 6x6 inch, poorly painted, white, faded cylinder concrete block. And you don't know any of the guys that are there. And you're lost because the sadness that fills your heart, missing your wife, missing your children, your parents, your friends, your life is just basically stripped from you. And then for me, it was even more difficult because every day in like the rec room, Trump's ugly fucking face is sitting there on a picture right next to, at the time, whoever the Bill Barr, and then the head of the Bureau of Prisons, and then so on down the line. So you got to stare at that picture all the time. And every time that you turn on the television, that fucking asshole is on it and saying something stupid. And you're wondering, why am I here when what I did, I did at his direction and for his benefit? So many of these people that we see that are being pardoned now, these people actually stole money from other people. They actually committed crimes. Yes, I acknowledged, right, campaign finance violation, but who gets 36 months? And then they're like, well, you had a tax issue. There was no tax issue. That's bullshit, and I will prove that, and especially my second book that I'm starting to work on goes after the prosecutors, it goes after the whole process. I'm a guy who has one speeding ticket in my whole entire life, 1985. I don't even think I ever had a parking ticket, right? I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs. I've never filed a late tax return in my entire life, not once, until 2017 when all this happened, right? When Trump paid $1,500 in taxes for the 2 years, I paid $3.1 million. And that's why I'm suing my accountant now. And it's funny, he screws up, and then he becomes a witness for the prosecutors to testify against me at a grand jury. I don't know. The whole system is just really messed up, and that's why I filed this writ of mandamus and this writ of habeas corpus, because I will continue for the rest of my life to be active in prison reform until they get it right.
And you had to also, they let you go home, and then they sent you back. And I thought about you when that happened. That must have been really weird.
Do you know why they sent me back?
Why?
You tell me.
I think weren't they saying that you weren't agreeing to sign whatever you had to agree to not do publicity and that?
Right. It was the fact that I refused to waive my right to publish the book, Disloyal, my memoir, which is basically a violation of my constitutional rights, and out of retaliation for that, they remanded me back to prison. But so many people believe, because the New York Post put it out there, right, which was a Rupert Murdoch paper, who was at the time was a big supporter of Trump, that because I was having dinner at a restaurant around the corner from my home, that I was in violation of my home confinement, which I was not. I wasn't on home confinement. I was on furlough, and I was permitted to go to dinners and to reintegrate myself back into the community. That's the whole purpose of the furlough. So that's, again, goes right back to the entire concept of the misinformation. But I do want to say, Ben, last week, you retweeted a post from the hilarious comedian and singer Randy Rainbow, who actually did something about me as well, that read, Pete Buttigieg will be the first gay member of Joe Biden's cabinet if you don't count me, which you fucking should. Now, it also goes on, you wrote, Secretary of Kick-Ass Entertainment and Satire, besides Randy Rainbow, who is high on your list at the moment for producing timely and effective political satire?
Oh, gosh. On Twitter, I appreciate people like Patton Oswalt, who I think is one of the funniest comedians out there, who's basically, commenting on the insanity of everything. I think there's like certain comedians who are able to just vent and be funny at the same time. I find like when I want to vent, it's not funny. I'm just like, it sounds like a frustrated guy who's like, anybody could be saying this. And it's like, yeah, duh. But if you can be funny and say it, people like Patton, I think they're smart people, like, Sarah Silverman, I think is amazing. Especially on Twitter, I think, there's an ability to like kind of take an idea and then say and find the funny angle on it, and also kind of like speak for what we're all feeling. So, people like that. There's a guy named John Fugelsang. Do you know who he is?
No,
really
I'm gonna now follow him.
Yeah. And then there's, Seth Meyers, I think, is insanely amazing. Like every night, what he's been doing with a closer look to me has been just like an amazing distillation of what is so fucked up about what's going on with Trump right now. So, and Colbert too.
Yeah, I did Seth Meyers. I had a great time with him
Yeah.
as soon as I was released, which is, it was a lot of fun, and he's a funny guy. So I truly did enjoy that.
I'm curious though, like having been in the maelstrom and having been, seeing yourself portrayed on SNL and jokes being made, and how did you sort of navigate that for yourself when all this was happening?
Well, it's funny when it's really not funny. It's sad, more like it. The very beginning, when this all started happening, was an overwhelming sense of dread and grief and despair, because you have the power of the government coming down on you like a force that you can't possibly imagine. And whether you play the role, whether you try to study the role, you really can't, because this process doesn't break your heart. Watching your children, watching your wife, watching your parents, the sadness, it doesn't just break your heart, it shreds your soul. And you just become sad beyond sad, to the point where, and I talk about it in my book Disloyal, while I was staying at a hotel, I went up to the roof, and I actually just stood on top of the roof, and I just wanted to jump off. And I just wanted to, to end it, because the pain when you're awake, the pain is enormous. And it's even worse when you're sleeping because your subconscious just takes you to a whole nother level of grief. And then you're saying to yourself, why is this happening? Right? I mean, it's an NDA, for God's sakes. And I've never not paid taxes in my whole life. If there's an error, no problem. Even the judge acknowledged that there's no economic loss to any individual or any institution ever. So what are they coming at me for? And
but do you feel like you did something wrong, though?
Well, I did do things wrong. I worked for a man that allowed me to take what I knew to be right and to do things that I knew were wrong, but I rationalized it. But even with, for example, the errors in the taxes, I paid them before sentencing. It's not as if I took $1 from you or from anybody. There was an error made by my accountant, Jeffrey Getzel, who I'm suing right now. It's not like I hid money like Paul Manafort did in the Ukraine. I've never had an overseas bank account. I never had an overseas business. Every dollar that I had earned was in either Capital One Bank or First Republic Bank. So nobody tax evades by putting money in the bank that's located at the base of the building that they live in. That's just pure stupidity. I mean, the only one who would be stupid to do something like that would be Trump, right? And I don't put myself on that level. So what ultimately happens is you become numb. You know, Ben, it's a terrible feeling, and I'm numb to this day, which I think people maybe sometimes give me too much credit for, that you're very strong and, I don't know how you're getting through it and so on. I think a lot of it is just you become numb. There's no other way to describe it.
But you figure out a way to I guess you're saying you put up whatever sort of like armor you need to go through life, but you also don't want to numb out to who you are, right? To your feel. I guess you probably have like a pretty close circle of friends too, and that's kind of like your core too, I'd imagine.
I do, and my wife has been beyond a rock, and my children as well, because had we not had the loving relationship that we have, I wouldn't be here. I have to be honest with you. I wouldn't be here. I stayed alive for them. And now my job is to make amends, not just to them, but to the country for creating this Frankenstein's monster. And that's why I do this. That's why I go on television, in order to identify the sort of psychosis of this narcissistic sociopath so that people understand exactly who he is. And I think thanks to so many people, myself included, like Mary Trump, like Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, like Anthony Scaramucci, like Omarosa, like so many people that actually really truly knew him, I do believe that we were able to persuade enough people that it flipped in terms of, because the election was closer than what it really should be based upon all of the man's actions. That's my belief, and I think that we did a good job in ensuring that an adult is now going to be in the White House.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to me, like who votes for Trump. And I know a lot of people who voted for Trump this second time around, and people I know, family, people, relatives, friends. We don't talk about it a lot, but the reality is that people, I think, dissociate the person from the choice as who they're going to vote for president. Somehow they dissociate it. It's still to this day. And that to me is the thing that I kind of have trouble getting over, is how they can do that. But I also think you can't discount the fact that 70 plus million people voted for it. You can't discount 70 million people, right?
Right. Many of them were voting because of their pocketbook, because he managed to convince the world that only he only could be responsible for ensuring the stock market and that these people's 401ks are going to go up. And it's funny because despite the number of times I've seen on the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the ABCs, the NBCs, charts showing that actually Obama had a better economy than in the 4 years of Trump, people don't care because Trump is very much like Stalin, right? Where if you say something over and over and over again, that people start to believe it. And then they start to share it as if this is some new type of information to basically show how smart they are, and they perpetuate this lie. That's Trump's belief system.
Yeah, and the lack of having any conscience really about telling lies.
Yeah, lie, right. 35,000 lies in 4 years, 6, 8 a day, something like that. But, going back to Saturday Night Live, because Jim Carrey recently retired his Joe Biden SNL character, electing not to move forward playing the president in future episodes. Now, personally, while I don't know his reasoning for not wanting to continue, I can imagine that playing these characters can be enormously stressful in this divisive political moment, especially when neither Trump nor MAGA fanatics have a sense of humor. Has it become too dangerous in this environment of death threats and street violence to laugh at your own political opponents?
Oh, gosh, I hope not. I mean, I don't think that's the reason. I think just first of all, just doing the show, doing SNL is a stressful thing. And it's really hard because it's getting rewritten or sometimes written literally the day of the show. So a lot of the times that sketch that you're doing is changing up until, I remember the one where I had the burner phones where, that one, that was literally being rewritten till like 2 minutes before we went on the air. And we couldn't decide whether or not I was going to have like a bunch of phones in a bin or just like have one phone, and things like that are so hard. Like for me, it's, live performing is not my favorite thing to do. There are people like Will Ferrell, or Kate McKinnon who are just brilliant at it, who just shine in that environment, but it's really, really hard. So I think that's part of it. I don't think it's the fear. I mean, in terms of how people react and, and what the real world reaction is to political satire, I think that, there's a small sliver of people, the people who will act out, when they're being instigated by social media, by Trump or whoever. But I don't think that's, in any way a factor or should be a factor in terms of, doing political satire. But it's a weird, scary world right now because people, you don't know what's going to happen, and people do crazy things. And I think that to me is one of the most disturbing things about what's come out of the last 4 years is just the environment that we're living in and having to constantly tell my kids, this isn't usually what it's like, this isn't, the president doesn't usually say things like this. He's supposed to be unifying. He's not supposed to be divisive. He's not supposed to say racist things, and it's just become a part of our lives now, the reality of our lives.
Yeah, and what's crazy is every divisive, every inaccurate statement was getting picked up by the press, and it was getting promoted, and it was getting, it was growing, and it was just growing out of control. Since you're a Star Trek fan, like a treble, right? It was it starts with 1 and then it grows to 10,000. For example, you brought up the burner phones, right? That is a lie. I don't have burner phones, right? I just don't have burner phones. And when the FBI came and they raided the hotel I was staying at the Lowe's, when they raided my home and then my law office, in my home, they took 9 cell phones. And they somehow must have told somebody in the press that there were a bunch of these cell phones, and they called them burner phones. They were my children's old cell phones. There was one that was going back, it was the Palm, the one that you had to put batteries in order to lift the antenna up. And that's a burner phone? What the hell are they talking about? So they leak it to the press. The press turns around, they're like, well, it doesn't make a difference. I got from a reliable source that it's a burner phone. It's like an Apple I cell phone, right? Going back to the year of Gimmel, right? It didn't work. It was shut off. They belonged to my children, right? And now all of a sudden, burner phones. And again, they promote, and the press continue to promote these lies. And it does matter. Truth is really important. And that's one of the things why I stood up before the House Oversight Committee and I said to the Honorable Elijah Cummings, God rest his soul, right? I'm here to tell the truth. And I'm here to tell the truth because I do not believe that under a Trump administration that there will ever be a peaceful transfer of power if he loses. And that's 20 months ago. I called it because I know the man, unfortunately, too well.
Yeah, you and Bill Maher, right? I mean, it really. Where do you see this thing headed in the next couple weeks? By the way,
so I wrote there was an article that quoted me where I turned around and I said that each and every day, as the clock counts down, T minus 29, 28, 27, you're going to see Trump do more and more crazy and crazier things because he can't help himself. The need to his fragile ego requires that he be in the press every single day. And he doesn't believe that there's such thing as bad press. So everything that he thinks he's doing, making him appear to be stronger and defiant and so on. But inside, he's fucking petrified because he knows that the New York Attorney General, Tish James, is right on his ass. And he knows that Cy Vance, right, is also going after him criminally for tax evasion, misrepresentation to banks, to bank fraud, wire fraud, just a whole plethora of charges. And that's only New York for right now. There's 50 other states here and then 2 districts that may be looking at exactly the same thing, whether it's his clubs in California, right? Or whether it's going to be one of the clubs in Virginia or in, wherever, right? In North Carolina, wherever it's going to be. That's where they're going to find these violations, and you'll start to see attorney generals and DAs going after him and his children and Kushner, and they're going to go after the Trump organization, and that's his biggest fear, which is making him more and more erratic, because he is actually losing his mind, thinking about the repercussions of not so much about the incarceration, because he doesn't believe that's going to happen, but losing all of his money, because that's his identity, without being able to say, I'm worth $10 billion. I'm $10 billion, right? I'm smart, I'm this, I'm that. Without having that ability to brag about that, he's just an empty shell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally am ready to stop thinking about Donald Trump all the time. That's
but that's not going to happen. Yeah, and that's not going to happen.
Well, I know that he's, people are going to, first of all, the Republican Party is going to have to figure out how they go forward. And I feel like I don't think the Republican Party wants, not that I'm a political pundit, but I don't think they want to, have him run again in 2024. And I think that everybody kind of wants to move forward and actually just live their life. And no matter what he does, I think, once he's out, in my opinion, it just changes the tone of everything.
Except for the fact that, as you stated earlier, 70 million people voted for him, right? So all you need is 20% of that, and you have yourself a real base. But Ben, What do you think happens to the entire Trump resistance media ecosystem that has sprung up during his presidency? Do you see that coalition of satirists sticking around for the Biden administration? And if so, what becomes of their mission? Is the new North Star to take down Trumpism?
Well, I think everybody's going to have to, that's what I was just saying, like everything's going to have to change when he's not president anymore. And it's going to be a lot less, no matter what, there's going to be a lot less attention on him all the time. And the cable news networks, both the right and the left, have fed off of that. I mean, the reality is that, the CNNs and the MSNBCs, they all, the ratings go up all, when they're talking about Trump. So that's going to change things. And in terms of comedy, I think it's going to be tougher to find comedy out of Biden. There are, obvious things that you can clue into, obviously regarding his age and things like that. But, ultimately, I think people personally, I think people are looking to just exhale and not have this be on the front burner all the time. And, it is a question, what's going to happen? What is Trumpism going to be after he's out of office? I think what the people who are following him, either they're going to see that what he's really about, or they're going to find someone else who will forward their agenda. But I think you're right. It's people's pocketbooks. I think people just want to be able to feel like they're being, in some way listened to, and that and the government cares about, making their lives better. And I think that's not what his agenda is. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what evolves. But, comedically, there'll be a little bit of a void for sure, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'd rather have a much more normal life.
Yeah, well, remember that Trump's agenda when we first started the campaign, and I don't mean the one in 2011, but the one in 2015, his words to me verbatim, Michael, we need to make this the greatest political infomercial in the history of politics. He wasn't talking about wanting to be president to do good for the country. This was all about increasing the value of the Trump brand. This was all about, opening the opportunities for more front page, headlines featuring Trump and the Trump organization to do deals all over the world. That's what it was. He never thought he was going to win. Forgetting about against the Clinton machine, he didn't think when you had 16 other Republican candidates that he had a chance. So when he wanted to make this into the greatest political infomercial, what did he do? He jumped on the whole birther movement because it was sucking the oxygen out of the room for all the other candidates. It's an amazing concept.
Yeah, and I've always wondered how much he actually believes what he's talking about, or what his ideology actually is. Because it doesn't seem like he has any real. I mean, if you look back, obviously he was never this right-wing Republican. So I'm curious, like what he actually believes.
Well, he's not a right-wing Republican. He's not an independent, and he's certainly not a Democrat. He doesn't believe in anything. That's the problem. Donald Trump is a popularist. So whatever the popularist view is, that's what Donald Trump is jumping onto. And this whole notion of stacking the Supreme Court, for the purpose of, assisting in the evangelical belief of, right to life versus right to choice. He doesn't believe. He's not a right to lifer. He believes in abortion. I mean, how many times we've had that conversation over the years? He doesn't care what you do. He really doesn't. But the popularist view for that evangelical group was one way, and so he decided to adopt it. I mean, it's a dangerous man who thinks like that because he doesn't think at all. It's funny, just to go back to one of my favorite movies, Dodgeball, right? You remember in the scene where like Peter LaFleur says to you, "Hey, White, you're a lot dumber than I thought," right? You remember your response back there? "Oh, I don't think I'm a lot dumber than you thought. I thought that I was once," right? Yeah. I mean, right? That's Donald Trump, right? Everybody knows he's dumb, but he doesn't think that he's a lot dumber than you thought that I thought that I was once, right? That's Donald Trump, and that's dangerous when this guy is holding the nuclear codes to this country and basically has he's got his hands in the economy of not just this country, but the world.
Yeah. I mean, I also think it's just exposed that how much the system overall supports someone who steps into that role. And, that to me is the most disturbing thing, is the enablers and how everybody around him, save for the people who turned, like yourself, but those around him to this day continue to support it just because the voters are behind him and they're afraid of losing that base. And that's the most important thing. And the holding on to power, like it just exposed that so clearly. That's, what goes on in our country.
Yeah, and it's sad. Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with politics, Trump or the election. But I do want to ask you about a tweet that you wrote on December 8th regarding the anniversary of John Lennon's death. Because you wrote, 40 years ago tonight, I was outside of the Dakota, my best friend and I in complete disbelief at what had happened. I got in trouble for staying out late. Still, one of the most defining moments of my life. Sending love to everyone who's lost someone. Can you take me back to what you were doing that night when you heard that John Lennon was shot and how it did define your life moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I was 15 and I was living on 84th Street and Riverside Drive. And I think I was watching TV and a special report came on the news. And I was a big Beatles fan. Big John Lennon fan. My best friend, Jonathan Harris, lived in the first floor. I lived on the fifth floor. We were in a band together. I heard it on the news, went downstairs to the first floor to his door, knocked on his door, and we just, we walked down to 72nd Street, and there were a bunch of people outside the Dakota, and it was, probably, I don't know, a couple hours after it happened. And we stayed there probably till like 3 or 4 in the morning. And, everybody was chanting, give peace a chance. And I remember there were people like chanting, give peace a chance, and they were clapping. And at one point, I initiated a double clap. I remember, and the crowd picked it up, and I remember thinking, oh, I started the double clap. And it was pretty, it was like for a 15-year-old, like it was just kind of overwhelming. I got interviewed by Meredith Vieira, who was a WABC TV reporter, like a man on the street interview. And I was devastated. I mean, he was an idol. And then a few days later, we went to Central Park, and there was a moment of silence in the park. And, it was just, like one of those times when you just realize that things happen in life that you can't control.
Yeah. So Ben, I guess now you're telling us that you were a trendsetter even back then at the age of 15.
I remember feeling proud that I had initiated the double clap in the group.
Yeah, they're very good. Well, that's the band guy in you, right? Mm-hmm. So I saw that you're a fan of James Austin Johnson's Trump impersonation, where he's talking about the movie Downhill and Julia Louis-Dreyfus's performance. Now, he seemed to nail so many of the particular nuances and the tics of Trump's speech. What in your mind is key to a good Trump impersonation?
God, I mean, there's so many different ones that are, kind of fascinating. I mean, there's one guy, have you seen the guy? Sorry, that's my dog out there howling. Can you hear Mo howling?
Yep, I love it.
Have you seen the guy who does Trump breaking down Scooby-Doo, the Scooby-Doo episodes?
No.
It's kind of brilliant. I mean, I think it's whenever somebody will take some silly idea and start talking about it in the way that he does, that, is basically like his stream of consciousness that is, always comes back around to him. I can't break it down really, other than when I see a good one, it really makes me laugh. I think, obviously Alec Baldwin started the trend of doing something that was just so stylized. I mean, that to me is like the stylization has to really be there, like to really take and exaggerate. But that's any good impression. But I'm awful at breaking down like what makes something good or bad.
Right, but Trump obviously has a lot of tics, right, and a lot of tells which Alec Baldwin seems to have mastered. I mean, the hand motions, the sort of look on the face when he puckers. I always describe it as a guy who was sucking on a lemon and you farted in his face. It's sort of that look, almost like your Zoolander look, to be very honest with you. Can you do that for us? And too bad people can't see. Oh, excellent. Hey, I just got a Zoolander.
Trump is in Zoolander. Because we, at the beginning of Zoolander, we interviewed people coming into the VH1 Fashion Award. So he's in the opening credits with Melania.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's funny. And I've seen the movie like a million times. I'm shocked. But there's actually a great line in Zoolander that reminds me very much of Trump. And, probably I would like to send him this on a card, right? I'm going to retire, withdraw from public life, and become a hermit crab. Yeah, do you remember that? I mean, wouldn't we just like for him to retire, to withdraw from public life and become a hermit crab?
I think it's up to the media and us to stop paying attention. Honestly, that's in
these movies. I've always had this. I've dying to ask you this one question for so long. In so many of these movies that you're in, it almost seems that there's a lot of ad lib that's going on. In Zoolander, did you ad lib a lot? And also in Dodgeball, did you ad lib a lot?
Sometimes, the rule of thumb is like you want to have something written that that works, that's funny, and then have the ability to let things happen. So, sometimes in the moment, if something is, going on, yeah, you always let it go. But someone like Judd Apatow, Judd has literally made it an art form of understanding how to improvise on camera, and he'll improvise literally like 20 minutes. A scene will go on 20, 30 minutes. He'll have the actors improvise, and then he'll edit it together and, find the best moments. But I find like having something written and then maybe something happens in the moment. A lot of those Zoolander lines were, the writing also comes out of improvising, together. Or like Will Ferrell, as Mugatu, like he's an insane improviser. So, this many years later, sometimes it's hard to remember what was written and what wasn't, but usually it's a mix of stuff.
What about the line, the one when you turn around and you say to LaFleur, goes, in our gym, we have stockholders. In your gym, you don't even have, and then you pause and you go, cup holders. Is that improvised? Because I use that line all the time.
Rawson Thurber, who wrote and directed the movie, I think wrote that line. And I don't remember making that line up, but it's really, it's all like you kind of like just want it to be loose enough that you can try stuff. And usually I find most actors, when you're doing that kind of thing, if there's something funny that comes up, sometimes in the moment it'll be great, you use it. And I think the key is just not having to have the pressure to have to come up with it.
Too bad, because I really was hoping that you were going to tell me you ad-libbed it, because I really enjoyed it. Now, I do want to ask you about something a little more serious than that, because you're someone who's deeply involved with Refugees International. Mm-hmm. How have you seen the degradation of conditions under Trump's America First policies? And what do you foresee changing under a Biden administration?
Right. Yeah, well, so I'm a goodwill ambassador for the UN Refugee Agency, and have been for maybe 2 years. And what's been really concerning, first of all, the U.S. has always supported the UN Refugee Agency and has always been a funder. And that really hasn't changed that much in the last few years. The thing that's been really, really disconcerting is under the Trump administration was that the resettlement numbers went down to basically zero. And the U.S. has always been a leader in that. And has led the world in that, in terms of, being a place to provide asylum for people seeking refuge from persecution and war. So that to me was really, just personally, really disturbing to see, let alone what's happening at the border, and the other things going on with separations of families and kids, which is just awful. But just in the refugee front, I think it's really, really important that the U.S. come back to raising the levels of resettlement for people in this country, and really, because it really sets the tone for the rest of the world. And right now there are about 80 million displaced people in the world, 80 million. And most of those people are being displaced by war and are going to the neighboring countries. Very, very few actually come to places like the US. I think it's maybe less than 1% of refugees get resettled in a third country. So those numbers, even when they're very small, they make a huge difference, because they allow the neighboring countries, the countries that are receiving the overflow, they give them an outlet to be able to handle, the logistics are just incredible in terms of having to support people, provide education, clean water and food and shelter, especially now with COVID. I mean, it's just been such a tough time. So I'm hopeful that the new administration is going to bring those resettlement numbers back. And, refugees have been nothing but a positive impact on our country. And when you look at the communities that they've come to, our economy, they've contributed billions of dollars in taxes. So, it's a very, I feel, very strongly, because you go and you meet these people. I've gone to places, talk to them, talk to families. They're families like you and I, who just want to kind of go forward in the world, want to be with their kids, want to provide a living, and just, live out their lives. And their lives are stopped short through no fault of their own, just, having nothing to do with them. A war happens and all of a sudden they have to stop and leave, and everything gets put on hold. So I'm hopeful that the U.S. is going to go back to what it's done in the past in providing a place for people to seek refuge from war and persecution.
Yeah, well, remember, I told you, my father being a Holocaust survivor, you talk about the pictures of families being separated and, thrown into, not cages, but in those, they were huts and buildings and stuff like that. So that was really one of the things that was a defining moment for me, in when I said, enough is enough. I mean, it's one thing to be an asshole. It's just another thing to be this big of an asshole. Yeah. I mean, and that's when I really felt I had to step away.
Yeah, for me, the real world consequences of what how the president can affect the lives of other people, it's a very real thing for hundreds of thousands of people. And I think, what's really important is to remember that these are just like people like you and I. I mean, that's like part of what I do with the Refugee Agency is just going and telling stories. And so that people can sort of see that these are not statistics and numbers, but they're people like you and I. And they're not something to be feared. There's something, really it's about human connection and welcoming people. And that's what the unity thing is about, and getting away from this divisive rhetoric and really, really embracing the fact that we're all people, regardless of where we come from.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, though. What was your election night like? Did you watch the returns with other people, or did you just need to watch it alone? Because I know folks on both sides, but this year was particularly nerve-wracking, and as it just went on and on and on, and actually still continues to go on. Yeah.
I was actually alone. And kind of, it was so stressful. I mean, I was really thinking like, gosh, I don't know. For me personally, I was thinking like, how am I gonna, because I remember 4 years ago being pretty shocked when Trump won. And it's sort of like I was working on a movie, and the next day going into work, and everybody was like, wow, that really happened. So this time I was thinking like, gosh, what would really happen the next 4 years? Because I really did feel like the way that the institutions have been being eaten away at, and what would happen without any need to get reelected on, another 4 years just was a really scary thought to me. Where we would go just in terms of the dialogue in the country too, and just how much anger there was out there. So I was alone. My daughter was in the city with my wife too, and I was out of the city, and I sort of just was like glued to the set, and then up late. And then, a friend of mine who's a newscaster said it's not going to be election day, it's going to be election month. And he was right.
Yeah, I've heard that saying. Yeah, he is right. And I got to ask you this question. You recently auctioned yourself off for charity, offering a 30-minute Zoom that I believe went for like $1,675. But my sources tell me that you were in the same group as Greg Gutfeld, the jokester from Fox and Friends, who actually, they say went for more than you. Do you know how much more he went for in the auction? And do you find yourself getting competitive during these things and constantly checking your price until it's over?
I made the mistake of checking once, and then after that, I was like, I can't do that. It's just talk about, like looking at self-worth. I think it makes sense that the Fox guy would go for a lot more because, he's a talker. That's what he does. Like he's, I think that's his thing. It actually was for Homes for Our Troops, which is Jake Tapper's charity, and I thought it was great that the Fox and Friends guy was doing it, for like just sort of crossing the divide a little bit, and more power to him. So I'm glad that he raised as much money as he did. I don't claim to be the most entertaining individual to have a Zoom with, so I wouldn't put a price on myself. I will try to make every minute of that 30 minutes though worth whatever the per minute number would be on that. And then some.
Right. I'm not buying that bullshit for a half second. That you don't care. You can say whatever you want to me. I'm not buying it. But I'll tell you, if I was your fixer, like I was for Trump, when there was going to be an auction for paintings, and there was one of him, I had a straw bidder come in, right, and I had it bid up to $100,000 when everybody else's at most was $1,000. All of a sudden, it's no-name artist, right, decides to paint a picture of Trump. His fragile fucking ego would not allow somebody else to beat him out in terms of a price. So he then has me reach out to a mutual friend, a straw buyer, and just to bid it up to $100,000. Right, but right off the rip, it wasn't even like, okay, 10,000, 15, 20, right? Like if you're watching Storage Wars, nothing like that. The guy just comes out and says, "I'll pay $100,000 for it." Right?
And what happened? How do you get the guy to do that? You just tell him it has to happen, and you pay him?
Yeah, and I told him I'll reimburse him the money. The funniest thing is, after he did it, we had a little bit of a difficult time getting the money out of Trump because Trump doesn't see it that way. Yeah, you're going to give me the painting, right? I mean, you don't want to keep a 6 foot by 4 foot painting of my head, do you? So the guy's like, no. So he was expecting the money back. And he turned around and he said, listen, I'm not joking. And that's when Trump used the foundation, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, to pay him the money back. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why the foundation ultimately closed. Because the foundation, despite what Trump thinks, is not slush fund money. It has to be operated like a foundation for a charitable purpose. And buying a painting of yourself for your fragile ego is not a charitable purpose.
And where is the painting now? That's the question.
It's up on the 26th floor in his private conference room.
Nice.
Yeah.
Looking down on.
It's looking nothing. The room is like a storage facility. But Ben, as I've taken up a lot of your time and we're approaching our hour time here, I'm going to hit you with one final question here. As a fan of 70s cinema, there are so many really great political thrillers from that era. I'm curious, if you were to create a syllabus of political films for paranoid political times, what would make your list?
Oh gosh. Well, probably the number one movie, in terms of that would be Parallax View. That's just the Pakula movie. Just because it's like the ultimate paranoid political thriller and just beautifully shot, and it's like Warren Beatty heyday, and just amazing just visual film. And I guess All the President's Men continues to be, for me, one of the classics. There's probably a few more, like the Candidate, Robert Redford.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that would be like those. I'd say those would probably be the top three. But for me, I'm also I'm just sort of a fan of 70s, 70s crime movies overall, like French Connection, Dog Day Afternoon, Taking a Pelham 123. Taking a Pelham 123 is probably my favorite 70s New York movie too.
Yeah, what'd you think of the remake? Not bad, right? I
did not really watch the remake because I love the first one. And by the way, I'm a Denzel Washington fan. And I forget, was it Tony Scott, I think, directed the remake? But the original is just first of all, my dad's in the original. He plays Walter Matthau's sidekick. So and it was the first movie set that I was ever on. But I just think it's kind of one of the coolest New York movies ever.
And how does Tropic Thunder fall into that one?
It doesn't.
I love that movie too. Was there a lot of ad-libbing going on in Tropic Thunder too?
Oh my God!
Because that's got to be one of the funniest casts around. And talk about funny, right? Tom Cruise. How great was he? Playing in a comedic role.
Yeah, and also that character was his idea too. When we were writing, talk about improvisation. We had written a script, and I talked about playing. At one point, I talked to him about playing my role, and then at one point I talked to him about playing the agent, and then he said, "Well, you don't have a studio executive. Why don't you have a studio executive in the movie and make fun of that?" And that's when we wrote that part. Justin Theroux and I came up with that because it was Tom's idea, and then he just killed it.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I couldn't believe it. Tom Cruise in a comedic role, because you really don't expect him, but he was great at it.
Yeah, he's his level of movie making knowledge and commitment to movie making is something else.
Well, Ben, I don't know how to say thank you enough. This has been great. Really, I wish you nothing but the best as we, come into 2021. Like I said, T-minus 28 and counting. And anything that you may need from me, obviously feel free to reach out. You know where to reach me.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to connect with you after having this journey of being you a few times and having that. That was my own experience. You had your own experience of being you, but I had my experience of being you, which was a much smaller level intense, but it's really been nice to connect with you after it. I'm glad you reached out.
Thank you. Are they going to bring you back? Another SNL? They're going to bring back all the
that's
all the
up
people?
to you, Michael. Depends what you.
I'll have to speak to Lauren.
Well, it depends what you do in life. We'll see. I hope not, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you and me both. But right. Ben, so great to see you.
All right, man.
Say hi to everybody. You got it.
Best to your family.
Be well.